Having gone through a few steps in getting UV maps applied, now we're feeling more comfortable, more courageous, and more competent than ever in working with UV maps. I'm looking at my block here and I'm noticing that a few things are off. Perhaps I want the B to be rotated, or maybe there's some stretching or something else that I'm not quite happy with. Or maybe I just don't like that the number 2 is right next to the other number 2. UV editing tools within Blender and other popular 3D software give you a lot of control over how these particular faces are applied, and how the images apply to these particular faces, I should say. And the first that I want to touch on is just the ability to move these different objects, I should say these different faces around. Now by default, these objects, let's click this button real quick. By default, these objects are going to remain connected. So if I select all of these, if I go to my face mode and I move one around, you can see how it stretches that object. Let's get a better look at this. So trying one more time. If I move this around, you can see how it moves and is attached to all of the other objects and points around it. This isn't super helpful if, let's say I want to move the number 2 around. Because if I move the number 2 and it stretches everything else, that's not the desired result. So Blender gives us this option called UV Sync Selection, and in some cases it'll allow you to kind of move these objects in a detached way. So that's something you can try. If we want to, say, move this object, this face, to be mapped to the letter B instead of the 2, or let's say the number 1 instead of the 2, that way, yeah, it's not touching another version of number 1. We can do that simply by turning on that UV Sync Selection. We can also rotate our UVs. So if I have this selected and I wanted to rotate that number 1, didn't actually get to see it because I wasn't aiming at it, but you can see I can rotate that UV, so that's very convenient. Hold Shift to lock. We can scale the UVs, so if I really wanted to, I could make this whole face take up that whole UV, and you see as I scale it and scale it and scale it, it ends up tiling that image quite a bit. Not super useful in this example, but just something to be aware of, is that you can scale your UVs as well. In some cases, it's convenient to scale down, so that way if we wanted that to just be a flat color red, we could scale that UV down so that it's only showing that very small part of that number 1, thus making it look like a flat red plane. And we have lots of other options as well. Now these other options at our disposal aren't really going to show themselves when we're working with such a simple object like this unwrapped cube. So I'm going to make a few more objects and we're going to noodle with those a little bit. So bear with me as I pop back into layout, and I'm going to simply add, let's add 2 more objects. Let's add a cylinder because that one can be a bit of a problem here and there. And let's add the mesh, this monkey mesh. And the monkey mesh is a much more complicated object with it's not a simple primitive, it's a much more complex object, which I think will show off for some UV wrapping experiments a little bit better. All right, so I'm going to throw a material on this guy. I want my wood texture back, so let's go ahead and make a new material. I'm going to get a new base color, image texture, and I'm going to do open 3D modeling. I'm going to grab that wood texture, and that works. And then I'm going to assign it to the monkey as well. So I'll leave my block in the middle, but I want to show on this cube. Cube. On this cylinder, I want to just show like the differences. When you have a simple cube that's made up of faces, the translation of a UV map made of squares maps pretty easily. But what does it look like when we do something more complicated like a cylinder, or more complicated even yet, a monkey? So let's go back into our UV editing, and I have my cylinder selected. Let's move over there, whoops. And you can see that right now the cylinder still has the ABC 1, 2, 3 type of graphic. So we want to change that. we want to go down to our wood texture, and it's once we've loaded it once, it's easy to select in the browser. So you can just click on this little image icon, drop down, and go back to our wood seamless texture. So this is what it's giving us. It's giving us each of those vertical slats, very, very small, and it's giving us the top and the bottom separated, not overlapping one another, but just separated down here. It's trying to make the best, I shouldn't say the best, it's trying to make the most efficient use of the image without overlapping anything at all by default. Meaning that it's not going to put these two cylinder disc caps on top of each other, even though that might be efficient, because it doesn't know if we really want them to have the same graphic. We may want them to be different, just like our cube, each polygon getting a different part of the graphic. So by default, Blender, when unwrapping, is going to give it make it look a little something like this. Let's see what our monkey looks like. Let's go ahead and grab that guy. Oops, object mode, monkey mode, edit mode. There is our monkey. So you can see this monkey, when it's unwrapped, maybe a little bit more terrifying for some than a simple cylinder, but it once again did not overlap anything. Here's the two eyeballs over on the right. It didn't overlap those, even though we probably are going to make the eyes look pretty similar one to the other. So when we're getting in here and optimizing this, we can take these graphics, these UVs, and we can sometimes stack them. So that way we can make more efficient use of our UV space. It's a little bit more of an advanced technique. We won't get into that too much in this video, but just know that we can do that. Or in the case of these kind of areas here, I believe these are the ears, if I've got that right. Yep. Those ears probably are going to have the same illustration if we're going to save space. Ages and ages ago, when I was working on the PlayStation 2 and working on some games there, we'd use these same techniques, but we needed to make our texture so efficient that we constantly were folding, overlapping, and duplicating our UVs kind of like this, so that way we could get them on smaller textures. So we would duplicate them and then scale them up so that way they still maintained resolution without spending all this space. I digress. All right, so back to our back to our cylinder for this example. Back into edit mode. Let's grab our cylinder, and I'm going to hit A to select all the faces, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to use UV unwrap faces, and I'm going to choose unwrap. And when I do that, it really didn't change things all that much, did it? It just simply unwrapped everything, and it happens to have a different orientation, but essentially did the exact same thing. Unless I go to cube projection, quite a bit different. It treats our disc, our cylinder, like a cube, and it does actually overlap some stuff. If you noticed, it took our two discs and it laid them on top of one another, and it tried to lay as many of our slats over one another and get them as large as possible, so it's a slightly different result. It tried also to keep them, let's see if I can render this, F12. Oops, it's rendering from a camera, not my perspective. That's okay. But if you can see, it tried to keep the texture wrapped around this object as closely as it could, so that way it looks, actually, let's do this. Z rendered. Yeah, it's still showing me my wireframe. That's okay. So it's trying to keep that as similar as possible with that cube shape. Let's do a different one. A, right click. Let's do cylinder projection. Whoa, what did it give us there? So it's doing a cylindrical projection based off of my perspective, which isn't really all that attractive at all. So even though we're unwrapping based on a cylinder, that cylinder projection doesn't do us much good. Sphere projection, even worse. So when we're unwrapping, we can use the default, which is the Smart UV project, or we can do UV unwrap faces and unwrap. It gives us about the same thing. And that's just a way for us to kind of get the polygons that we see over here mapped in different ways over here in our UV editor. Then we can always go through the process of moving them around by hand manually as we need to. Again, when that that UV sync selection is active. If we needed to move a single polygon, we can do that just by selecting over here and then moving over here. That works out pretty well. And you're asking, Matt, why would I ever want to do that? Well, maybe there's a case where you want to get these few polygons to show, like, say, that knot area up above. And you could move these just so that that knot is visible, if indeed that was an important piece. Or when you do like this unwrap, let's say you had some sort of logo or graphic, something like, I don't know, lumberjacks, wood stumps or something, and you had a graphic, a logo or something in your texture, and you wanted to move these in that area, you could do that as well. So that is pretty much it on the UV unwraps for our cylinder. And for that monkey, we have a slightly different process, but we'll get into that one another time.